I welcome you all to today's special webinar opening the 2022 Mobilize virtual series. It's a programming highlighting the winning cities of the Sustainable Transport Award. While we all gather in the virtual room today, I'll briefly go over some technical notes for today's session. As always, we are recording the webinar and we'll be also making it available on our YouTube channel and ITDP's events page. During the session, we'll be collecting questions for the Q&A portion with the panelists, so feel free to add those at any point in the Q&A box. And you can also use the chat box for remarks or insights. So welcome everyone again to 2022 Mobilize Virtual as we kick off the annual programming with the STA Honorable Mention recipient, City of Tartu, Estonia. Tartu has firmly pursued its climate goals, bolstering its mobility and access through data, participatory measures, and partnerships. In today's session, we'll have a chance to hear from 3 city representatives who will present the story of the city's journey, highlighting the achievements and lessons learned from the process. And after the formal presentations, we'll pose some questions and open it up to the audience. Today's presenters will include Tonis Arius, head of the Department of Sustainable Urban Planning. Tonis will give us some background on Tartu's urban development, the main goals that guide the city's work on sustainable mobility, access, and climate-related outcomes. And he will also speak about the street programs supporting the mentioned outcomes. Next, we'll hear from Kaspar Alev, climate change specialist for the city, who has led development of Tartu's energy and climate action plan. He will get a bit more into detail about role of data, shaping some of the city's decision-making around mobility and access. And finally, our third speaker, Axel Johannes Part, is a mobility specialist for the city government. He will talk about the mobility policy and solutions the city implemented to improve access in the city. And again, welcome to our panel. We will now begin the formal presentations, and I'll invite Tonis to share with us his insights.
Yeah, and thank you, Avona, and hi to everybody also from my side. It's really great to be here, to see so many people already joining us, and maybe some extra will come in the meantime. My name is Denis, as Avona said. I'm the city architect. I've been the city architect in Tartu already 10 years now, but since last June, so almost 1 year, I've been leading a totally new team on sustainable urban planning. And the idea behind this team was really to have strategic design, urban design as a cross-disciplinary team in one place, and to, really break up the silos in a municipality, in an organization. And so far, I must say, it's been working great. But I'll give you a brief overview of some of the things we are doing, and some of the ambitions we have. And of course, the ambitions, they all arise from some quite certain problems that we've seen evolving during the last years. Just to give you a brief situation check, the population of Tartu is almost 100,000. It's a really nice university town. And I'll, of course, invite you to see the city and enjoy the city. It's really cute. But at the same time, we do have the problems that we are seeing all around the world, the issues of suburbanization, the thing of services leaving the city center. Even the university wants to leave their original historical campus from the city center, etc., etc. And also the rise in car usage, which is a huge problem regarding emissions and the living environment here. In order to tackle these problems, we joined the Covenant of Mayors already in 2014. Last year, we really achieved, I think, a really nice spot when our council said yes to an all-digital city master plan. It hasn't been done in Estonia before, but now it's here. We can also share you the link. It's nice to see for all of you, I think, how a digital master plan really works. And we also fixed our CCAP in our council last year. So this is something we are really working on right now. And last week, we had great news. We were chosen to be one of the 100 climate neutral smart cities, mission cities by 2030, which really boosts our ambitions regarding climate neutrality and of course, simply very good living environment in the city. So ambitions are great, but it's also a huge responsibility. While talking about the main priorities regarding Tartu's city's future, I guess one of the key words really is a short distance city. It also works under the concept of 50-minute city all around the world. We are joking here that 50 minutes, it's too long for us. It should be like 1 or 5. But otherwise, short distance city concept, I think it's quite understandable for everybody. Sustainable mobility, of course, in Tartu, the mobility sector is one of the biggest. We are seeing the biggest rise in emissions. So it means we really have to change how we move, how we use the city. Biodiversity, of course, I'll come back to that also. And of course, energy consumption is a real priority to us. Regarding the short distance city concept, one of the key things we are trying to achieve and also keep as a good positive thing that we have today is a compact city center. Tartu has been evolving quite compactly, but the suburbanization has left its mark. And right now we have been dealing with different master plans on how to achieve this compactness. Again, we were also quite destroyed during the Second World War. So there is a bit also like improving the old emptiness that was part of the war. And so we're working in a way to densify again the city, to activize the riverside. And here you can also see already some new examples. On the left is a new part of a promenade that was built with a new university building right next to MIOG. And also the idea that we also only use mixed-use developments. We have said it in the master plan that most of the city center developed areas should be mixed use, so that it's not a single-use place, but we see lights all the time, 24/7. And when we talk about the short distance city goal, one of the key things we have to understand that we have to see how the city works right now. We need better tools for it. Here you can see a nice tool that was actually approved a few weeks ago, where we have layers and layers of data of how the services are distributed right now all around the city of Tartu. Where are the kindergartens? Where are the schools? Where are the shops? And how well is any kind of plot in the city accessible to workplaces via public transport? And basically what these layers show you is how walkable it is. It means that a school must be like 1.2 kilometers away from your home. A kindergarten must be 800 meters away from your home. So we see the walkability map here. And how do we use it also is how to create more space for people, less space for cars. On the left here, you see our statewide regulations for parking, which have been rising all the time. So a new parking regulation comes out and it needs, again, more and more space for cars. So we tried to change this negative trend into a positive one. So this is why we have this walkability map. Basically, it shows you if a place is accessible to different services, if it's greatly accessible to schools, kindergartens, and shops, then you can reduce your parking standard a lot dramatically. Most of Tartu is quite accessible. You can see it also on this map. Of course, there's a huge heat in the city center, which means that it's full of cultural venues. It's full of all kinds of working places, etc. So it's a very concentrated city to the center, which also brings us a great question of how to really amplify access to the city center via bikes, pedestrians, public transport, and reduce the space for cars. It is a great challenge. Talking about curated biodiversity, this is actually a project that is a really flagship project in our European Capital of Culture event, which is in 2024. So if there's one thing you should remember tonight is that you should meet and visit Tartu in 2024 when we are the Capital of Culture. And Curated Biodiversity is an awesome project. Although the Capital of Culture is in 24, we are already working on this project on biodiversity. It means basically testing out different sites all around the city, changing the streets, changing different parks, and testing different kinds of methods of how to create a more diverse park area in the city. And it really is a nice and interesting project we're doing right now. And it's really important, well, I'm talking about all of these different issues, that we understand that we have to do it all with the citizens. You know, cities are not meant to anything else but for people, you know. Cities are for people and for the people. And one of the nice processes we've been having already for 10 years is our participatory budget, where we let the citizens choose what to do with 200,000 euros. And I'm really happy to say that each year people are really thinking about mobility issues. They're saying which kind of parks, which kind of playgrounds we want to improve or add in some places. And it has changed, I think, the cityscape during these 10 years quite a lot. And it also gives us, the officials in the municipality, a very nice overview of what the people really want. What are they looking for from the future? And there's another process that is just right now ongoing. It is our first climate assembly, which is an assembly of people, so-called ordinary people from around the city. It's 55 citizens. And in order to choose these 55 people, we sent invites to 15,000 people. So we really wanted to get us kind of a mini Tartu from different age groups, people living in different areas, and really to understand how people see the city in different places. And it's a really great process. And at the same time, when we are dealing with all these really big investments, for example, my colleagues will talk about bicycle roads to be built in the future years to the main streets, talking about, you know, rising the amount of greenery in the streets. It means big investments and big changes, and changes are never easy to come. They're never easy to come. So it's quite important for us to also test these ideas in real life, to give a glimpse of the future and to get an idea of how people really accept these changes. One of the great examples of these experiments is our Carfi Avenue project, which was done at first in 2020 and then again in 2021. And this year we have a totally new idea with it. But the idea is, here on the pictures, you basically see on the left, you see a historical photo before the Second World War, a really busy, really a city for people, liveliness, and public space. Then we see the after-war asphalt field that was used for, you know, promenading tanks and stuff. And now it's simply a, you know, field of asphalt. And it's disconnecting the old town from the riverside. And on the right, you see our Carfi Avenue project, which was basically a 1 month long project where we closed the streets for cars and opened it up for people. We even brought a huge pool on the street, which was a really hot spot, you know, for kids all of July. And what we saw was really that people enjoyed it. They really enjoyed the change in public space. Last year, 2021, we also tested out some new stuff like returnable packaging. The whole month was, you know, we had different kinds of greening ideas and tests doing, and we had only green electricity and waste sorting there, which was really great. And this year we are really, turning up the volume and doing things a bit different. While last years we tested this site only it was basically, I think, 400 meters in the city center. So now we are taking the main streets running through the city center, about 2.2 kilometers long, where we changed the situation with taking away two car lanes, turning them to bike lanes, and connecting two very important parts of the city. For the left, you see new pedestrian tunnels, and on the right, you see a new modern university building at the riverside. And the reason why to deal with this place, why to test out such a thing, is really to tackle the problems of our main streets that are really noisy. They're noisy. They're also, the air is not so good, and we can see that at the same time there are a lot of apartments there and hotel rooms. There are schools on the main streets, university buildings and offices and restaurants. The restaurants, they can't put the chairs outside because it's too noisy and too dirty. And of course, we know what the answer is in the future. The answer is to lower the speed limits, to have less vehicles, to have more greenery. But as people have come to, they're kind of used to this space as it is. It's terrible, yeah, but it's as it is. We can't change it. So it's really important to test these ideas, and this is really what we're doing, testing it. As you can see on this drawing also, that we will take the whole car lanes from both sides, giving it to bicycles, adding attractions on different parts of the city. Also, the cafes are saying, oh yeah, we want to come out, we want to have terraces there, etc., etc. So it's an awesome project. First you have to test, then you can invest. And of course, when we are experimenting something, then it's also very important to use this experiment as an analysis platform. So what we're doing, the whole event, it will go on since June up until the end of September, so 4 months. And we get to really analyze how people change their traffic patterns, how it changes their travel times. Is there a change for mobility split? We believe there is. And of course, it would change the noise and air pollution, because at the same time, we are testing a lower speed limit in the project site. So just to point out really smart words from a very famous guy, city is composed of different kinds of people. Similar people cannot bring a city into existence. So this is something I think we'll always try to keep in mind while taking care of our processes, that's the main point of a city, to bring together different kinds of people. And that's really the point I like to make. So thank you from our side.
Thank you so much, Tonis, and thank you for closing with this really amazing quote. It can get us into thinking about public participation. And thank you. And with that, I'll invite Kaspar to take the floor.
Hi, my name is Kaspar. I'm from the same department as Denise and also as Axel coming up after me. I'm climate specialist for Tartu, and I've been, I don't know, unfortunately or fortunately, working here even a bit longer than Denise has. So I have been doing many jobs, and for about a year now, I'm the climate specialist and tackling with all types of interesting climate-related stuff. I will be talking to you about maybe about smaller and a bit more specific things, and maybe some fun things regarding sensors and real-time stuff and things that we do to understand kind of mobility and traffic and how people move about in the city, and how we evaluate our experiments Dennis talked about. So I don't know if you know about this, but Estonia is quite famous for, I mean, if we're famous for something, then it's our e-government and digital ID. So basically what we do here is that we have a way of digitally giving a signature or agreement on different types of things, whether it's communicating with the government or city government or national institutions, or just like doing deals with each other, digitally signing contracts, whatever files or things that are necessary. And here's a nice example of the president's digital ID card, which you can also like apply for a digital residency in Estonia. So everybody has a chance to have their own identity in the virtual world. So we use that in a way to share digital data and give digital data an ownership, which means that we are using this solution, which is connected to an Internet of Things platform, and that stores different types of data that we might need in our city government work. So for what it means is basically, for example, environment sensor company that we ask to set up some sensors. They set up sensors and they start sending the data into this IoT platform. But before they start sending, they define the data and say next to this data that Tartu City government is the owner of this data, which means that data comes directly to us. It's secure, other parties are not able to access it, and we have the right and ability to view it and to share it, whoever would like to use it. But the sharing is not done on an email or some account basis, but it's done on the national registry ID, and you can access the data with your or your actual electronic ID. So, for example, what type of data are these people and these companies providing for us? For example, there's some stuff like electricity consumption. The national electricity grid operator is able to say that these data points belong to Tartu City government, and we get pretty close, pretty accurate data on our electricity consumption. Also, heat production, heat consumption in our buildings. Then there's traffic sensors, validations in our buses. We have electric bike share in Tartu, so we get a lot of different data on bikes to understand how people cycle in the city. Environment sensors, you know, temperature, CO2, NO, humidity, noise levels, data on our how our street lighting works. We also try to pick some data from Google Maps to understand the mobility in the city. And there's some more stuff there. And why would we use this data? To understand long-term impact of our decisions. So maybe some data is not valuable at the moment, but when you get a timeline in 2 or 3 years, then it shows a trend. Short-term analysis of what I will be giving you some examples of. Quick action planning, again, to think ahead what might happen according to data, and it's also a bit fun to like play with the data sometimes. Okay, so for example, where it all started, in 2019, Metallica visited Tartu. This was a great year for Tartu. Most of the fun things I described earlier happened in 2019. New buses, new bikes, Metallicas, and also our IoT platform started around there. And we are 100,000, and they sold like 60,000 tickets to this event. So you can understand it was a major event in Tartu history. I don't think there's ever been so many people visiting Tartu at one day. So the data was available. The data for us that was available in quite quick time was our mobile devices numbers, our traffic counters in the city, and we also used some rudimentary artificial intelligence to understand how the people move about in the city. And what we did basically was what did we find from this data then is that, for example, first we know that 60,000 tickets were sold. Our data showed that we got 45,000 extra guests into the city. It's according to mobile devices that were present in Tartu. So maybe 15,000 people from Tartu went to visit the show, but 45,000 guests is a lot. But we can also see like where they moved about in the city, which said that although 45,000 guests, only like 10,000 of them made it to the city center where they spend most of their money, maybe, where they add to the local life, not just to the event. We also got additional 17,000 cars into Tartu. And we also saw that around 10,000 of those cars left straight away. Not from data, but just to say that it was very, very nice that metallic visit. We only had 2 incidents during the night, only 2 drunk people taken away. No fights, no nothing. Just if you're interested more about the data, there's much, much more than I have a chance to talk about here. You can see a YouTube link here to our overall video of Smart City, which I'm sure will be shared with you in the chat. And Denise talked about car-free avenue, which we also try to measure as much as possible to understand what's the impact of it. And there were a lot of hypotheses that if we do this, all the city's traffic will grind to a halt. It will be so bad. It's the worst thing ever for climate and for people and for whatever. So what we did there is we got this idea that we should use Google Maps to understand the impact of it. So we tried to, we asked Google every 15 minutes for a couple of data points, how long it took to come from a specific point to the city center and then leave the city center to a specific point through the street and through along the shortest reroute. And we could compare this data through time. And what we saw there during the event, comparing it to periods before and after, we saw that exiting or entering the city, the time to get to the city by car increased only by 90 seconds, and exiting, the average time increased around 30 seconds. So our hypothesis was right, that this doesn't create any havoc in the city, but it's just a cool way of showing you that there's some cool data that you can ask from Google, as long as you don't ask for too much, and they won't get mad at you. And we use this data to understand the city wider right now. And how do we monitor mobility in the city? We have traffic counters. You can see there, this is like roughly the city map of Tartu. The blue line or the circle more or less visualizes this, the border of the city, and we have all the entrances covered with traffic counters. But we also have traffic counters on 2 main things to divide our city. The 2 red lines visualize, one of them being the river and one of them being the railroad. So we got traffic counters on those crossings. We also got cyclist counters. We got pedestrian counters. We got bus validations, bike share data, this Google API data, but we also use local Estonian startup help with artificial intelligence that also can analyze real-time video feed and to count cars and cyclists and pedestrians. So when we combine all this data, we come up with a pretty new tool, which I encourage you to take a look at. It's in English, thankfully, and it's our more or less real-time model split tool. It's developed by Tartu University. It takes all of our mobility data and lets us understand where people are coming from, where they are going, what is the share of mobility, how much the movements in the city are done by walking, by cycling, by car. So yes, it's quite a new tool which we are really proud of and we will be developing in the future. So I'm open for questions in the chat and later on. Thank you very much for your attention. My last slide is missing.
Thank you, Kaspar. And the Metallica performance was definitely an interesting addition and twist here in your presentation. And we'll continue the story of mobility improvements with Axel. So I'll pass it on to Axel now.
Great, hello, hope the screen is visible. So yes, as said before, I'm the mobility specialist in the city of Tartu. My name is Axel Part, and I will very briefly go over the kind of sustainable mobility strategies and general approaches, and then also introduce some of the activities we have done in the past or are planning for the near future to kind of illustrate the approach we have taken. So in terms of the general mobility strategy, we see mobility as more of a, not as a kind of a just optimization exercise, but more we see it more broadly as a kind of a social science, I guess you could say, in the sense that it affects so many areas of life. It's such a big part of general public policy. You know, in terms of health outcomes, social connections, climate goals, economy, space allocation, pollution, air pollution, and the list goes on. So our focus is mainly on these kind of, you know, connections between very different areas of life and how mobility policy can have an influence there. You know, reading from the Tartu SECAP Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan that Kaspar was a part of compiling, the vision statement is a really good kind of basis to illustrate how we approach things more generally in terms of mobility policy. So it reads like Tartu is a smartly developing city with good energy and a green pioneer, and the kind of most important concepts here are the smart development and green pioneer, which I will briefly expand on. To do this, I'll really quickly go to a global context where we know that the 20th century was pretty much a giant experiment with the car. The cities were designed according to the needs of the car, prioritized. The car needs were prioritized. Cities changed very rapidly, and by the end of it, we discovered, you know, the cities weren't very nice places to live if you designed it according to the needs of the car. So in the 21st century, smart development is now based on the, you know, this so-called experiments conclusions. We know that we want cities for people, and we also know that we can influence how people move, mobility behavior. So if in the past it was seen as a kind of external variable that you just had to react to with your infrastructure design, today we know this is not the case with our infrastructure decisions and other mobility policy decisions. We can actively shape how people move about in the city. And of course, you know, looking at life in a modern city, car is still in the picture. But we're not saying that cars aren't useful tools. They are. It's just you have to use them for the right job. And this is to a large extent what informs our policies in Tartu. So by smart development, we see you know, making use of reliably gathered knowledge, which means learning from others' experience, learning from global conclusions, the very same ones I was talking about. So having a really goal-oriented mobility policy, as well as aiming for city for the people. But we also see the local data, so instead of global, local data is also very important for this approach. This allows us to make smarter decisions, to know more about our situation and how to approach this. And Green Pioneer, we see Green Pioneer as someone who acts quickly and ambitiously, because as I said, the conclusions are global. Everyone knows these kind of concepts around the world. So the competition is also global, and it is stiff. A lot of cities are aiming to go where we aim to go, and we see real value in being at the forefront of these coming changes. So going more into our mobility policy, here are our goals in terms of modal share. So you can see that today, or a couple of years ago, car use has been increasing, and it's really quite dominant, almost half the commuting trips in Tartu. And we want to take this by 2040, we want to decrease this to around a quarter of all commuting trips, and kind of even out all of the main modes. And the main increase will come from cycling. We see it as having a greatest kind of unused potential. And now going into these kind of activities to illustrate what we mean by smart development and green pioneering, I'll start with organizational structure that Dennis already touched on this new department that we have, because we are really quite sure that you can't expect change in results without changing the organizational structures first to kind of mirror the ideas you want to realize. So that's why we, before it was sort of strategic urban planning and design responsibilities were really scattered. Like everyone had responsibility for them, but also no one had responsibility for them. So today we have one specific department that is kind of curating or leading the way, but doing so in cooperation with all other departments to make sure that our activities, our plans are in accordance with our goals, that we are actually going where we say we want to go. And in terms of mobility policy, we really see a need for it to be coherent and holistic. So taking a really kind of large view and making sure that every bit and every part is there, every necessary part is there. So of course, as I said, it needs to be goal oriented. We need to have specific goals in mind, where we want to go, what is the best outcome for the city. Then also one of the kind of main frameworks we have is the avoid, shift, improve framework, where we want to avoid long journeys as much as possible. When you can't, we want to shift the mode that people use, and where we can't shift, we want to improve the efficiency of people's mobility. So kind of use e-cars, for example, instead of petrol cars. And we do this all based on local data. So we see this as being really necessary and useful for understanding where we are, what are the best approaches to take to tackle certain issues, and also to measure progress. And here is the application that the kind of accessibility application that Dennis also mentioned, which is really key for our policy, kind of underlies it, because this shows how walkable, how accessible the city is. If we can really ask people to avoid long journeys, if the kind of means is there, if the city enables people to avoid longer journeys and to shift to more active modes. And this accessibility map is also key for not just land use planning, but also for mobility measures to increase people's ability to move about. And one really big initiative we've had in the past, we are making use of this accessibility map, is the bike share we have, which has really taken Estonia to be known as Estonia's bicycle capital, because it was a few years ago, 2019, that we started this this project with 750 bikes, and it covers the whole city, and it's been really popular. I think around 12% of residents use bike share at least once a week. So people are really taken to it. We've had 5 years worth of rides in 2 years. That means we, saw that we thought people would use it much less than they have actually used it. So it's been taken to really well. And now when we plan the locations of docks, we also make use of this accessibility map to see that we are placing them where they actually most needed. And this bike share is actually a really good example of also contributing to both green pioneering but also smart development, because based on this information use data of bike share, we've been able to design really good data-based bicycle path network to be completed in the coming years. And this is the one right here, where based on mobile positioning, but also this bike share data, we were able to identify the routes and streets that people would, where bicycle use potential is the highest, not necessarily the use today, but potential if the infrastructure was good enough, where people actually want to move. So, and this I see it as a really big achievement, that we aren't planning bicycle paths anymore, where it's easy to create some like edge of town or small streets. But these are the biggest streets, the biggest, highest traffic counts in the city, and this is where people actually want to move, whether it's cycling, walking, public transport, or car use. So I think it's really important that we are planning bike lanes where they actually need it. And this is also true for our bus network that was redesigned even earlier, that we have already completed, where it was also based on where people actually want to move. Mobile data was among the most important bits of data there to redesign the network along those really necessary travel lines, and we have changed the network, and as a result, the public transport use increased by 10%. So that was a really good success story for us as well. And going back to bicycle networks, we also, after planning, we also aim to use best international design practice as a smart development to learn from others. And I think this is the last one. I know I'm running short on time. Sorry, but what Dennis also talked about and what Kasper talked about was the car-free avenue project, and the car-free avenue, together with some other really useful experiments with space that we have conducted in the past few years. This one here is at a school where we closed the surrounding streets for cars to allow for more pedestrianized areas around the school, so that it would be safer and more pleasant for children to walk or cycle to school. And this was again just this spring we conducted it, and it was again very popular, and we are now working on permanent measures to make this a reality all year round. But I'm not going to talk too much about the data that we can gather from here, because this, I think, Kasper and Dennis covered quite well. But what I'd like to highlight is that these are really good communicational measures as well, because if you use pilot programs or temporary interventions, and people can actually feel it, they can experience the change, so that they can make a more informed decision afterwards, whether they like it or not. And we have seen that people tend to be very skeptical of the change at first, but once they have been there, seen it, experienced it, the perspective really changes, and the support is overwhelming. So yes, this is Tartu. We aim to smartly develop a city for people, be a green pioneer, act quickly and ambitiously, and have a really holistic and participatory mobility policy by people, for people, because we see that people have to be on board. We can't do it top down to be green pioneers. Thank you. I'll maybe quickly go over one of the questions that was in the chat. I added some very quick slides to answer it. So it was about participatory budget, how it has changed outcomes. And I think this year's participatory budget initiative is a really good example. It's around a former railroad route. It's this one here that connects the main railroad and the river, which is not in use anymore. And since the 1960s, actually, in general plans, a big highway was planned there. But last year, after a study and also pressure from this participatory budget and other citizen initiatives, the plan was changed. And instead of a highway, now there's supposed to be a linear park with pedestrian and cyclist facilities. And thanks to participatory budget in 2021, we actually already built some of it, and they did come. It's already in very intensive use, and this is a very clear example where participatory budget played a part in changing outcomes that have been in place for over 50 years. The plans that have been in place for over 50 years. Right, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you for that presentation, and all three of you really, really insightful information. So I'll just pose a couple of questions before we go into the Q&A and choosing some of the questions from the audience. So quick question here to Tony's, Tartu City architect, about really the starting point where when the city took this approach towards reshaping its future. So was it driven by some pivotal moment, or maybe was it a political agenda that spurred this process? Just curious about that.
That's a great question. I guess one of the tipping points really was during the last, the 2006, 2007, the boom time. And that's when we saw the rapid suburbanization in Tartu. And what happened was we could really feel it. How when you came to the city center of Tartu, the services were gone. There was basically like, hay balls running around on the streets, and that was a problem. We could all feel it, and the local businesses felt it also. And this is the time that we started to act. We started to work on a city center master plan in 2011, working on the future strategies. And I hopped on in 2012, really working on the concept of short distance city and the concept of re-densifying the city center in order to tackle this suburbanization problem. And I guess this went as a snowball, into very different fields of mobility and biodiversity and all the other problems we need to tackle. We need to tackle still, really. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And here's the question, it could be for Kaspar or Axel. You both spoke about the role of data. So I was wondering, how was data used to plan the bus routes that Tartu has updated in the last 2 years? Are there some examples of replanning those bus routes based on data?
So the question was how data was used.
Yes.
Well, as I said, the main kind of innovative or the biggest kind of part of this data, I think there were like 27 different data sets used, but I think the kind of core bit of data was exactly this mobile positioning, which could really accurately tell us where people were moving from and where to, so we could see where the actual need was for bus lines to be located at. So that's where we could design them to be, especially the timetable to be especially tight, or a lot of buses in an hour to move there. So that was also kind of philosophy that changed for the bus network. That it's not like round lines anymore that go through every location, but more of a pendulum lines that are really a lot of them very tense or dense schedules, so that people can don't have to wait much and can change bus lines quickly.
Great, thank you. And another question from me is to actually all of you, and anyone of you can answer, but it's about stakeholders working together. In terms of mobility decisions, you have different agencies being involved, from transport planning departments to transport agencies, parks department, maybe there are many more in the city of Tartu. And also Tartu collaborates with institutional and private sector stakeholders. So can you tell us how the different stakeholders work together towards the mobility outcomes?
Shall I, or do any of you want to? No, I'll go ahead. So I think this structural change that both me and Tennis talked about has been quite important in changing the relationship between different departments. And I'm not going to lie, it's not been easy always. Changing a quite rigid structure that our city government is this quickly is a big challenge, and so it has been for us. But I can honestly tell you that the cooperation between different departments has improved a lot over this span that we have operated, and so the idea is for us to really form teams from different departments for specific tasks and to change information to combine capacities. And this is increasingly happening. And in terms of the civil society, Dennis talked about a lot of these initiatives that we have, where we want them to be on board. We want their ideas, the kind of acceptance, climate assembly, participatory budgeting, these experimental interventions. These help us be in touch with the public, help them to understand where we're going, why we're doing what we're doing. And a lot of the private sector stakeholders are also actively involved. Our bus network runs on biogas, 100% on biogas, and this is produced locally here in and around Tartu.
That's great. Thank you so much for this answer. So we have about 6 minutes left, and I'm going to go ahead and pick some questions from the audience. There's one specifically here from Jean Charles, and it's asking about specific controls that limit suburbanization. So whether there's a green barrier, zoning to limit new development. So can maybe Tony's?
Yeah, I can comment on that. Thanks for the question. That's really a spot on question. And the answer is twofold. The big problem in Tartu is that it's quite a small municipality. And there is this problem that if our municipality kind of turns up the regulations regarding, I don't know, quality public space and all the kinds of limits you have, and you have to have the best architecture, etc., then there is a choice for the private sector developer to simply, hop to the neighboring municipality, which is, I don't know, 2 kilometers away, really close, really. And they don't have these regulations there. So this is one of the reasons really why suburbanization is also happening so easily. We can turn up the regulations, but if the neighboring municipality doesn't, then it's a difficult situation. And this is something we can't change as a municipality, but we are also working and having a great dialogue with the state. We also are involved in a kind of a green expert group in the state, giving ideas for the Prime Minister how to tackle these problems, and they must be done statewide. But what we are doing in Tartu is basically the master planning process. Planning is a huge tool, and that's where we can set our priorities. That's where we make the rules, and that's really where we try to kind of amplify the possibilities to build where you should build more compactly, where you have already public transport lines, where you have the streets already, so that you don't have to add new streets on the edges of the municipality. And how do we do that? We simply, basically we see a denser urban fabric. We give more permits for higher floors, and we have for example, we have the rules for density and rules for building heights. They are higher in the city center and much lower away from the city center. So it is a bit of an argument that you have a denser situation. You have more space to sell in the city center, and it keeps the suburbanization down. But there is a third piece of the coin, is that how to also achieve the situation that it's great for families to live in the city center. How to really achieve this, that you have very different kinds of people, different kinds of lifestyles that are weighted to the city. And I think Tartu really is the perfect place. I, with a family, also live in the city center region, and it's a perfect place to be, really. But that's also the great positive side of Tartu, which is quite a small city. Thanks.
Thank you for this excellent answer. I suppose it's a little bit of a carrot and a stick situation where you try different tactics to keep the city compact. We're going to change the gears here. There are two related questions on weather, climate, and geography from Jonathan and Fatma. So Fatma was asking about any challenges that the city is facing due to weather conditions and geography. And Jonathan asked about whether there are any tactics or methods that the city can think of to make active travel safer and easier during winter, which we know that Tartu lies in the northern hemisphere and probably has heavier winters. Should I pass this question to Axel? Yes.
Yeah, Axel.
Yes, so, sorry, I was answering a different question in Q&A. Yes, the climate issue is often brought up in Tartu, but fortunately we have great neighboring cities in Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, where snow is also common, but where cycling is also common. So we know that it can be done. We know that cycling and the use of other sustainable modes can be kept up during winter as well. For us, it hasn't been the case historically. During winter, cycle use declines quite a bit. But what we are, the specific plans we have for addressing this is definitely infrastructure. We know from studies that cities with better infrastructure people are less influenced by weather conditions if the infrastructure is good. And the other one is winter maintenance. It's all about winter maintenance. We know that the cities where cycling is high during winter, they have put a lot of emphasis on really good winter maintenance. So that is what we need to do, and what we plan to do, and what we are going to do. But this is still a work in progress for us. Yes. I hope I answered the question. If not, please specify.
We're almost actually out of time, but I will throw the last question here. It's related to data from Sanjay from India. So Sanjay is asking, since implementation of technology may be difficult in countries like India, are there some suggestions for maybe like some innovative methods that you could think of to suggest to Sanjay? And I know it's, question may be related to other contexts, but in terms of mobility data, are there some ideas that you could share? Kaspar, do you want to try out this question?
I'm so sorry. I have never been to India. I would so much like to go. It's really difficult to relate. I'm sorry. But I mean, we've tried to not overemphasize the technology when we try to design our city and understand our city. That we have, I would say, we have too many technology companies trying to break into our in through our doors and to make us understand that their product is their most best ever thing developed. Yes, there's a lot of those businesses and companies that are that maybe have a product that they say that will solve all of your problems and issues. So I would be wary of those and just look for specific solutions that can give you an answer for your specific question or your specific need. And whenever possible, try to turn to universities for extra knowledge and extra experiences whenever possible.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this answer. So with that, I will thank our panel. This has been a really insightful session. I really appreciate your time. I encourage everyone to visit ITDB's website and social media to check the latest releases and upcoming events. And with that, I would also like to invite you for our upcoming webinar on May 11th. It's an installment from the Cycling Cities series, which highlights the best practices and tools stemming from ITDB's Cycling Cities campaign. And also, please stay tuned for the next technical webinar with the City of Peshawar, our second honorable mention recipient on June 1st. So stay tuned for that one. And with that, again, thanks so much for your time joining in today, your presentations from the City Tartu. We really appreciate it. And the recording will be available soon for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.